Welcome to Veteran State of Mind. I'm your host, Geraint Jones. Guys, put your brains into gear today because we have a hell of a lot of information for you today. I'm not going to lie, the gentlemen that we had on today, they are a lot more intelligent than me, and I am still kind of bamboozled by just how incredible the work is that they're doing. One of them was a former Navy SEAL. The other one was a former U.S. Navy doctor. His name is Erik Won. He is the president and CMO of Wave Neuroscience. Wave Neuro are the world's leading experts in brain health, brain injuries, PTSD, depression and anxiety, amongst other things. They're partnered with organizations like United States Special Operations Command, USC Center for Neuro Restoration, all kinds of different charities, universities, foundations. These guys are top draw, believe me. Ned is a former Navy SEAL officer. He suffered blast injuries himself and has gone through the kind of treatments that we're going to be talking about. Both great guys. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think as far as episodes go, I think this might be one of the more important ones that we've done. And it's certainly something that I think everyone should look into more. I hope you spread the word from this episode, guys, because there's information in here that could help someone in a time of need. Maybe, as you'll find out in the podcast, it's not all about blast injuries and brain injuries. There's stuff in here that can help everybody. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please spread the word. Please tell people about it. Please leave a review. Please go and follow these guys. Everything will be tagged up in the show notes. I just want to say, again, before we move on, guys, I just want to say thank you to Combat Comb Over for sponsoring today's episode. I really want you to go and get behind Combat Comb Over, guys. They work so hard at the business. They give a lot for veterans. They do a lot for veterans. They sponsor this podcast. They make this podcast possible. They make this episode possible. And all they're asking in return, not even for you to buy anything, just go give them a follow on social media. All right? Just go follow them. Just go and check them out at Combat Comb Over. That's all we're asking. All right. Let's get into today's podcast, guys. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Erik Won and Mr. Ned Mason. Ned, Erik, welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
We got a little freeway going on today, so I'll just for any listeners going, obviously it would be awesome to have done this podcast in person, especially because that would give me an excuse to be in California, but we're doing it from the other side of the world. If we start with you, Erik, and give us a little background to yourself, and then we'll come on to Ned, and then we'll kind of pick things up from there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so my name's Erik Won. I'm a physician. I'm currently the president of Wave Neuroscience, and we're a translational neuroscience company. But relevant to this podcast, I was a Navy flight surgeon, was part of Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and was involved in many of those operations, and left there and finished up my training at Harvard, and then entered this space. So that's my background in a nutshell, and I'll turn it over to Ned.
Yeah, thanks, Erik. So again, my name is Ned Mason, and I'm the Director of Operations at Wave. And I've been here about 6 months. And prior to this, I was a Navy SEAL for just over 20 years, and focused on pretty much a mix of both the regular SEAL teams and the SEAL delivery vehicle teams. And wrapped up my career as a SEAL team commander on the West Coast.
That's awesome. So what's the SEAL delivery team?
Yeah, so this is if you've seen some of the SEAL movies, it's been somewhat featured in those, but it's a small submersible that is launched out of larger submarines to largely do clandestine operations.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. Right, well, I want to dig into your backgrounds a bit, guys, because you got obviously the Wave stuff is really incredible, interesting stuff, and want to come on to that. But I'd love to know, first of all, a bit more about the background. So, Ned, let's stick with you for a second, because you mentioned you were a SEAL for over 20 years, so you're a pre-9/11 SEAL. What was kind of the motivation for you joining that? Because they're obviously now, I know we've got listeners who aren't even 20 years old. So for them, they've grown up with SEALs being this thing that everybody's heard about, everybody's known about. What was that like for you growing up? How did you find out about the SEALs, and how was that a career that you went into?
Yeah, it is a different time. And I forget that, many of us that came in before 9/11 had such a different optic. And, it's easy to romanticize that, but I think, I've been lucky to see so many of the newer guys coming in the teams, and they are the most impressive young Americans in our case, but, of course, across the different services. It's unbelievable to see the men and women coming in today. But so pre 9/11, I went to the Naval Academy, which is in Annapolis, Maryland, and that's the primary commissioning source for the U.S. Navy, along with ROTC and post college. There's a program called OCS, and so I ended up going to the Naval Academy because that was my best chance of being a pilot. My dad was a Vietnam pilot, multiple tours, flying off aircraft carriers. And so I went to the Naval Academy because I wanted to be a pilot. And that was the path. And when I showed up there, that was the course. And it was interesting because over my first year, I was a swimmer and played water polo. There was, we were prepping for the first summer, so the summer after freshman year, and it's, you kind of get to pick what you want to do. And I'd heard from a friend that there's something called dive school, and you get to go to Panama City, which is kind of like the Mallorca for the British, I believe, where you go for spring break, and there's debauchery, and there's a lot of young people wearing not a lot of clothes. And so I heard about this dive training there, and my friends said, "Hey, we got to do this little screener this weekend, and then we can go to Panama City for a month on the Navy's dime." And I'm like, finally, this is what I signed up for in the Navy, a little adventure and, some free hotels and hanging out with great guys. So I went and did this screener, and it was a wake up call because it was probably the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was kind of a prep for SEAL training. And,
okay.
I'm just a skinny little guy. I had no sense of the aptitude, or the amount of pain I could endure. And through this program, I was lucky enough to be selected to go to dive school. And that was the start of it. Once I got into that culture of the dive community and the SEAL community, there was no looking back. That's where I had to be.
So dive school is not SEAL training itself, but you came across SEAL instructors and that kind of thing while you were there.
Yeah. So yes, there's not SEAL instructors there. Dive school is different, but they're culturally very similar. And in that pre 9/11, both communities were somewhat viewed as offshoots and somewhat viewed as not a long career path within the Navy. And so once I finished dive school, I'd read every book about SEALs kind of going into that. Some of the original books by Orr Kelly, by Rudy Bosch, and by another one called Point Man. And some of these books really started to build the foundation of what I thought of as a Navy SEAL. And so I did a temporary duty to a SEAL team on the East Coast for 2 weeks. I still don't know how they accepted me to go there. I'm just this midshipman. But I called up the SEAL team. I'm like, "Hey, I've got a couple free weeks. Can I stop by? And I want to hang out with you guys." And somehow these guys are taking this 19-year-old. They're like, "Yeah, come on over." So I show up at this SEAL team, and it's one of the East Coast teams. And they're like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of diving going on for the next 2 weeks, but we have a pre-sniper course. Are you interested in getting some great instruction over the next 2 weeks?" And that sealed the deal. I mean, it was unbelievable. So that started everything.
Was there a bit more flexibility in the military, you think, back then when it came to that kind of stuff? Was a bit more, I don't want to say cowboy, but like people were willing to do things without like a massive stack of paperwork?
I think so. And there's obviously pros and cons to that, but that less structured, quicker decision making kind of organization is what really drew me to special operations. Yeah, absolutely.
So Erik, how about yourself? Was it were you drawn in by family members, or was there something else that was behind your decision to join the military?
I would say my rationale was much less noble than Ned's. I took a scholarship to pay for medical school, and the thought of serving really did resonate with me. My parents were first generation immigrants from South Korea. They came here on educational scholarships, and I grew up just feeling really blessed. I'd visit my family in Korea, and it was still very impoverished at that time. And so, they came here, carved out a better life, worked their butts off. And my sister and I were blessed. We both became doctors. She's a cardiothoracic surgeon in Washington. And I always wanted to give back. And so this was a way to do it. I didn't anticipate that I would love it as much as I did, but just meeting such generally good people, patriotic people, it was, I would say, some of the best years of my life, and was really honored to serve in that capacity, and it ended up being something that stuck with me even to this day. So
I'm not sure if we've had someone on before that's been the child of like first generation immigrants. Because it's something that really kind of informs the U.S. military in a kind of special way. I think that you get a lot of people in there who have either just come to the country or are so kind of, they're new to it and feel like they have a responsibility to pay something back. So whereabouts in America did you grow up, and what was it like growing up with parents who had come from a different part of the world and were trying to make it in a new country?
So my dad got his PhD in Berkeley. I was born in Oakland, Alameda. And then he got his first job at Fleur Daniel down in Irvine, California. And so I grew up in Orange County. And it was always kind of, they spoke fluent English. And so there wasn't a language barrier or anything like that. But there was always kind of deep gratitude, almost reverence for the opportunity that we had. And it's funny to think back at now, but whenever we'd had visitors from Korea, or, we would go visit Korea. Being from America, just the U.S. badge carried so much weight. Like Levi's were worth 10 times more there than they were in America, just because they were from America. And so we were always raised to really just respect the opportunity that we had and to work hard. Almost obsessively so. It's just kind of work ethic was always ingrained in us. And it was just part of our DNA. And when the opportunity came, when I finished college and the recruiter came knocking, there's this opportunity. It's something I was ready to jump on, and was glad I did.
So when you say something about the recruiter, then is this due to your grades? You get the military know your grades, and they come looking to kind of like headhunt and pick up talent. Is that how it works?
Yeah, they kind of come. They were going through medical schools. There was a shortage of doctors at that time, and I think there's still a bit of a shortage. But they go to medical schools, and just it was called the Health Profession Scholarship Program. So it was a year for a year. They would pay for the school, and then you would provide a year of service. And the way they are able to get more years out of their doctors is they ask them to do what's called a general medical officer tour. So just after an internship, they send you out to the fleet, and you take care of people. You're embedded within a unit. Within the SEAL teams, there's undersea medical officers, UMOs, and within aviation units, there's flight surgeons. And so, I had a path to choose when I finished my internship, and I chose the air wing. But many of my colleagues chose the UMO route, and so we all kept in touch. It's even though it's a huge organization, it's a relatively small community. And so many years later, Ned and I, our paths crossed just by happenstance, and we've been friends ever since. But
that actually sounds like a really good deal as well, though, because how much does it cost for someone on average to go through medical school and everything in the States? Do you any idea?
Oh, yeah, it's absurd. Back then, my friends were graduating with about $250,000 US in debt.
Oh my God.
Yeah, these days I think it would probably be a multiple of that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a pretty good incentive. So can you talk us through then what a Navy flight surgeon is? Like what a kind of, obviously there's no such thing as exact day to day in the military, but as close as you could get to one.
Yeah, and it's not as sexy as it sounds. Like when you hear flight surgeon, you think, oh, these are guys who are like in CASEVACs, medevacs, doing surgery in the airplanes. And in actuality, we're just doctors who are embedded within the units. We serve together, we travel together, we do deployments together. And the thought in the aviation community is when you're tied in that closely, you have a better situational awareness from a safety perspective. And so if I have a pilot who's about to run a critical mission, but his child was just diagnosed with cancer and his head might not be in the game, I might tell them to take a breather on this one and not do that mission, hand off to somebody else. We do sort of annual physicals to make sure that they meet all the qualifications that the military requires for its aviators. And so we run a bunch of different tasks. We make sure before deployment that all the immunizations are taken care of. If we're going into an area with yellow fever, malaria, we try to make sure from a preventive perspective, the units are all well taken care of. But on deployment, the mission changes a little bit, and people are actually getting hurt, whether they hit an IED or they get shot. And so our role in that case, of course, is become preservation of life and limb, and to do everything we can to save lives. And so that's a high level view of a flight surgeon's job.
So at this level in your career, then, we're talking, you were dealing with the physical side of well-being rather than, say, the mental side, more so. Yeah,
that's it's very much that case, and it's when you're part of the unit, it's an incredibly fun job. You get to sit in the ready room and talk with all the pilot and air crew, but we had an unfortunate distinction. We suffered some of the first casualties of the Second Gulf War, where one of our aircraft on a night mission, low light level, there was a sandstorm on the horizon that obliterated sort of the horizon and a reference point. And one of the pilots, it's believed to may have had a vertiginous episode, went nose down. And we lost 14 souls that night. And so as a residue of that, we had quite a few folks who are suffering from post-traumatic stress. And just some of the signatures of that conflict were, of course, concussions and traumatic brain injuries. Not even always from the mechanical injury of taking, a blunt force trauma to the head. But we've since learned, and I think it's become fairly common knowledge, that just the blast wave from a detonation can concuss somebody if they're too close. And so for the preceding 12 to 15 years, my mission changed a little bit. And even though I got out of the service to finish my medical training, my dedication to my brothers and sisters that I served with, I don't know if that ever goes away. Like once you've really served in close quarters with people that you care about on that level, you're always trying to find ways to help. And so, and it's been said that many times the way you get over sort of grief and sorrow and anger is to find purpose and mission. When I came across this technology, at the time I was doing kind of hybrid work of emergency medicine and preventive medicine at the Boeing Company. They have a defense division. So I was sort of a flight surgeon for the test pilots at Boeing. And I played a secondary role as their chief technology officer for medical services. And so I came across this technology and just had a hard time believing it could do what was being touted, just because we had so many struggles with post-traumatic stress. We were losing friends to suicide and all sorts of problems. And but I owed it to myself and my friends to go investigate. And as I learned about it and started to pull back the curtain on how this could do, how it could help people with traumatic brain injuries, concussions, and even on many levels as the human performance adjunct, I realized that this could be an inflection point in medicine and how we're able to treat some of these conditions. And so for me, my career really changed quite dramatically at that point.
Before we get into what Wave is, I'd love to know, Ned, when you joined the teams, what was the view on post-traumatic stress disorder? What was the view on what was the average team guy's kind of view on mental health? Back in those early days of the War on Terror.
Yeah, I imagine it was really similar to what it was in the UK, and it just wasn't something that any of us saw. I think when I came in 99, 2000, a lot of the Vietnam era guys had already retired or had been so senior that I never had any interaction with them, unfortunately. And I think, that generation of soldier and sailor, they knew what it was, but as I came in, those lessons weren't passed along very well. And of course, I watched MASH and all these other shows that started to give a sense of what that was, but it was obviously looked down upon. And as a young guy in the teams, and anywhere in the military, young guy or gal, you're so dedicated to mission, and nothing gets in the way. And you don't have a family yet, or I didn't have a family yet. I didn't have a lot of those things. So to me, mission was everything. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes I made early in my career, was not focusing on people's families and understanding and having compassion that there are lives that are outside of the mission. And so I didn't know anything about mental health. And even as I went through my career, and I ended up having tremendous issues with TBI. And even while I was going through, and we'll get to this later, of course, but even when I was going through this treatment at the company I now work at, I would see senior level, flag officers, admirals and generals come through here, and they wouldn't even come back to the unit and say a word.
All right.
Like, they wouldn't say anything about it. It was still even this is post, post 2010, for the next 5 years or so.
Wow.
Even then, even though people would talk about it in generalities, no one was willing to get personal about it.
Right.
No one was willing to say, here's what I'm struggling with, if they still had a uniform on. And that was eye-opening to me, because I'd been struggling with this stuff, and the people that I respected and I really wanted to hear from, and I knew they knew, wouldn't say anything. And that told me that we're still not where we need to be on this. And that's one of the reasons I want to come on this podcast, is to talk about that a little bit, and that we as leaders in the military, as members now, as Erik and I are, of this mental health and wellness and optimization and performance capability, we need to make sure people understand what's going on. You know this as well as I do, because you've talked to so many veterans. But after having been there myself, I can see it on somebody's face.
Oh, yeah.
I can spend a few minutes with somebody and be like, yeah, I know what you're going through. The empathy that I now share with veterans, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily veterans, but anybody who struggles with mental health, I can see it, and I know the pain. And unless you've been there, it's really hard to understand that. But I'm sure, have you seen the same thing? You can kind of pick out, like, man, this person's struggling.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out then that it's not just veterans, that it is it's just people in general. But, like, you're right. You can see it, and I think that's now, when you look back with hindsight, it's one of the things that's kind of so frustrating about it, is you think it's like, it's like you guys go for a run or go for a run. It's hard, and you can see it on people's faces, and people will say after, God, that was a hard fucking run, and people will talk about it, and it's like, but you could see the mental stuff was hard on people's faces, but no one would go, God, that was fucking hard to deal with, I think a lot of it comes down to you love the job so much that you just you just worried that if you came out and spoke about it, then you'd be taken away from doing the job that you love, which is not, no one's going to take you out of the job because you said, God, that was a hard run. But if you start saying, like, oh, that was a hard mission on me mentally, then, there was that worry. And I'm sure, in the environment you were in the special operations world, that's probably even more of a, of an issue. One of the things I want to ask as well, Erik, I can't have you on here without asking you this, because I've always been really interested in the world of kind of like test pilots, and who are these people that volunteered to be a test pilot, and what is it like being what is it like working with them? Because that seems pretty fucking nuts. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting question, and I would say pilots in general are just a fascinating group of people. I would say they're some of the most gifted storytellers I've ever come across, and just I don't know if they profile them that way or it's just a gift, but every pilot I've met has been I think it's an amazing storyteller.
It's because they're the most well-rested people in the
military. there are rules. There are rules that they have to get a certain amount of sleep, but yeah, they do. I know, at least for the Navy and what we call the Navy Aerospace Medicine Unit, they do profile them they want people who will push the envelope but not break the rules. And so with every type of aircraft platform, there are certain specifications where they know, the stress of the aircraft, you can pull a certain number of Gs. And it's usually the rate limiting factor is usually the human and not the aircraft. But yeah, they're always the ones, whether it's, a high performance fighter attack aircraft or, a cargo heavy lift aircraft. The test pilots are always the ones that are going to make sure that there are safety tolerances built in, and they're a unique group. There's no question. I can't imagine what's going through the mind when you're the first person to break the sound barrier or to go Mach 3. And it takes a certain amount of courage and cojones to do that. But, from my perspective, it's just it's a privilege to get to work with these guys. And but yeah, when they do come across certain health struggles, in our generation, there's a group that's aging out where they can no longer pull 5G, 6G turns consistently. And so those are always difficult conversations. We call them courageous conversations to have. But for the safety of the individual, many times you have to err on the side of caution and just suggest that they might move to a different platform or do something a little bit more safe.
Is that tied into the whole kind of like the purpose side of mental health as well, that they feel that their identity is tied up in those jobs, and that's where like maybe some of the dangers are mental health wise when you take someone out of it?
Yeah, that's an interesting piece of it. When for aviators, if you've been flying your whole career, sometimes 30, 40 years, it's hard to hang up the shoes at that point. Like it's so much a part of your life. And I know on the private side, I had a friend who continued flying. They got out of the service, but they're flying private jets, and they're still performing sort of high performance loops and Q&As. And I think that there's a certain kind of personality and profile that gravitates towards that. But yeah, it's I think a valid question. You can write books and study that infinitely, and they're always very fun and fascinating people to talk to.
So you were working with these test pilots when you were at Boeing, which obviously a huge company, is a very I'm sure a very difficult position for you to get in the first place. So can you talk us through how you went from that to being at Wave and what basically the kind of like the core concepts and treatment is that's in the work that you guys are doing now?
Sure. Yeah, and it's funny to think back to now because when I was considering making the jump from a Fortune 50 company to a small startup, the advice I got was so binary and different, where a lot of my business friends and physician friends were not keen on me making that jump. Just there's a lot of risk involved, and why would you leave a very comfortable position to take a chance like that? Whereas I think a lot of my veteran friends, it was kind of a no-brainer. You have to, just from purpose or mission, you have to take that chance, even if it's 1% that you could help a community, a vulnerable population, whether it's concussion or post-traumatic stress. You have to take the shot. And so ultimately, I think especially us as veterans, we're sort of driven by that. And so I took the leap and I've never looked back. And I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that I've had, and the people that I've met have been just phenomenal. But it wasn't an easy decision to make. I'm not going to, gloss over that. It's always difficult to make these kind of career changes. But it's been fun. And I think a big part of any kind of new technology or innovation is going through the scientific validation process. And that's been one of the harder parts. Is the medical community, maybe more so than most, is very slow to adopt innovation and technology. And so we've run through and are currently involved in clinical trials with U.S. Special Operations Command, Uniformed Services University. We have trials going on with Department of Veterans Affairs and other academic institutions. And so juggling all of that and making sure it's rigorously done research has been a big part of, I think, my responsibility. And so juggling all those balls has been kind of the new challenge.
The transition for anybody out of the military is very, is a challenging one. And I think, as you're saying, like a lot of people, they will go down the route of what makes sense financially on the page, but that might not be something. I think with somebody that's done a profession where they have so much identity and purpose tied into it, it can be something that really kind of messes people up when they go into a job that they are being paid well, but they don't necessarily feel that fulfillment that they used to get in the service. To be in a job now where you can still be of service in a different way, I think is so important to people. And for anyone leaving the military, I think this. It's not just about the paycheck. You need to be making a check out to yourself as well for your mental well-being, and that includes purpose and doing something where you feel fulfilled. So, can you tell us, Erik, about what the actual kind of the treatment is? Well, like what kind of is at the core of Wave?
Yeah, so the base technology is something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, and our version of it is called MyWave TMS. TMS is short for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it's really a 3-step process. And the first step is getting what's called a quantitative EEG. EEG short for electroencephalogram. And this is an electrophysiologic picture of the brain, much like an EKG is an electrophysiologic picture of the heart. It gives us a window into how is the brain functioning, how are the different areas talking to each other, and where are there areas of abnormality that might be able to function just a bit better. And we take that digital image and we run it through computational analytics, and we have a team here that looks at those images and designs protocols for each individual. And if I can talk about that just a little bit, all of us have a unique signature in terms of our cognitive function and brain function. And 2 of the parameters that we're most interested in are what does your alpha waveform look like? And this is during your wakeful hours. How many times per second your brain encodes information. And we're typically somewhere between 8 and 13 hertz. So we encode information 8 to 13 times per second. And the other thing we look at are if there's a lack of coherence where that frequency lapses in a certain area and might be too high or too low. And to illustrate that, if we see an individual who, let's say in the prefrontal cortex, the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, if they are cycling at 2 hertz, but the rest of the brain may be an 11.5 hertz brain, that information mismatch may manifest as a certain cluster of symptoms. And because this is the executive function area of the brain, the planning focus attention of the individual may not be as good. And this happens to be the stereotypical waveform pattern for depression. And in a different scenario, let's say the right backhand side of the brain, somebody fell off a ladder and hit the back of their head, maybe cycling at 35 hertz. So the visual cortex resides here. And if you're oversampling your environment 35 times per second, but the executive function area of your brain can only process it 11.5 times per second, there's this information overload that's going to cause this person to experience anxiety. And so these images are very informative, I think, for our team and our doctors, but they're also very illuminating, I think, for our patients, because many of them are struggling and they don't know why. And to be able to see an objective image, sometimes there's this epiphany of, gosh, I'm not just a jerk. I knew something was a little bit off. And if I can just tune up this cluster of neurons and bring them back to a healthier, more optimal position, maybe I'll feel just a little bit better. And we've seen pretty strong correlation with being able to tune up those areas that are firing at different rates and how people start to feel. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But just to talk about the third step, we have this FDA-approved device called the transcranial magnetic stimulator. It's basically a brain stimulation tool. And we can geo-navigate to any area of the brain that's not working well and give it customized precision-guided stimulation at exactly the frequency that the brain would want. And it's 30 minutes a day. It's painless. You sit in a chair and the technology does its work. And over time, usually 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes up to 6, we'll get EEGs every week to 2 weeks, and we'll treat every day for 30 minutes. And we will typically be able to see these waveforms modulate and change and improve over time. And just to be totally transparent about it, we're now of the belief that it's not all technology. The patient has so much to do with it. And as long as they have good behaviors and they're protecting their sleep, the body does a lot of the work for us. We are, Mother Nature designed us to be healing organisms. And if you put 2 ends of a broken bone together, that bone will heal and many times grow back stronger. And if you put 2 ends of a wound margin together, if somebody gets a cut, and you stitch it up, that wound will heal. And the brain's really no different. Whether it's the physical trauma of a blast injury or the emotional trauma of a loved one being lost, or even the chemical trauma of hard alcohol or drugs over years, certain areas of the brain may fall out of synchrony with that dominant wavelength. And it just needs a nudge to go back in the right direction. And the body does a lot of the work for you. So that's the treatment in a nutshell. And I don't want to monologue too much, but just to reframe some of the discussion, we talked about PTSD, and one of the things that we've learned is that, people who are really struggling, you can see these images and they're 2 standard deviations away from normal. And that's, I think, a very strong focus of our team and our mission. But there's a separate group of kind of subclinical changes where, especially if we talk about an elite operator or an elite athlete or an executive of a company, over time, whether it's through chronic sleep deprivation and just working too hard, or, life happens and, maybe they have a traumatic event in their life, they may degrade from their optimal state to, say, 80 to 70 to 60% of where they would like to be. But to all the world, they still look like high performers because they started out being so high performing. And that's a population that we'd like to reach too. And so we've learned through talking to people in these communities that if you just reframe the discussion and don't apply the label, because people are a little bit sensitive to if you're the CEO of a company, or if you're the quarterback of an NFL team, the label concussion or post-traumatic stress is one for better or worse. And in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any stigma around it. But if we can label this something different, whether it's human performance or neurooptimization, it doesn't matter to us, but I think it matters to the individual. And if we can reach them and reframe the discussion, everyone wants to perform better. And there are a group of, you're probably well aware of, people who are interested in biohacking. And this whole community, I think, has gravitated towards this kind of technology where if we can modulate the brain to function even 5 to 10% better, how that manifests in somebody's day-to-day existence and performance can be profound. And you just think one of the most common things that we've heard is people getting more restorative sleep, and all the downrange benefit you get with that, whether it's emotional resilience, patience, improved cognitive processing speed. Those are the things. We didn't set out to kind of measure those things, but our patients have come back to us saying that they're noticing these significant improvements in those areas.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there as well with the way that this is viewed is so important as well. So, like, one of the things that you kind of picked up on then is the fact that you can show people these images and show people that, look, this isn't some character flaw. This is essentially like the same. You don't take your car into. I'm putting this into my context now because I'm an infantry soldier, and I know there's steam coming out of the ears of all the infantry guys out there listening to this. So if I've got this right, you don't take your car into the shop and say that my car's feeling sorry for itself and it needs to get its act together. You say, there's something going wrong with my car, it's not functioning properly, and you look at that, you diagnose it, and then you fix it, right? And so, like, being able to give these people these like these basically images of and information about how their brains work, and shows that it's a fault in the sense of it's a mechanical fault rather than it's your fault as a character. It's like a character fault. And I think that, like you were saying, the difference between saying, so post-traumatic stress disorder, that sounds very different to optimization. Like we could be talking about the same issue, and the effect of using those words is so much different. And I think, as you know, I was saying to Ned, like especially in the special operations community, where you've got these guys who are elite performers, most of them have been elite performers most of their lives. The idea of showing any quote unquote weakness is terrifying. But if it's looked in a form of you will be a better operator, then I think that's just such a tiny little. It's such a little switch to make, but can make all the difference in removing people's resistance to this kind of, to this kind of treatment. How have you been finding people's willingness to embrace this? I mean, maybe you can speak to this, Ned, because you are somebody who has benefited from it.
Yeah.
What's your kind of experience been like of this treatment? Can you talk us through it from the point of view of a patient?
Yeah. So I'm going to walk you through from kind of two perspectives, my own, and then as I've engaged, some of my sailors as the commanding officer of the SEAL team, when I would see this, how I engaged them and how they responded.
Okay.
Just as Erik said, I was doing fine. Like I was finishing my job. I was, I have two great kids, and, I was getting through life fine, but I knew that something wasn't quite right. I hadn't had a full night of sleep in about a decade. I had, something at the clinic that we call word search. The words were always just right on the tip of my tongue. I get upset at the dumbest things, kind of whether it was getting upset in the car or, whatever. And my memory was really, I couldn't remember people that walked by 5 minutes earlier. And so I knew things weren't quite right. And what I did is there's this incredible program at Special Operations Command called Preservation of the Force and Family, POTF. And there was a guy, a phenomenal SEAL captain named John Doolittle, who was in charge of that. And I went to John one morning. I was like, hey, man, John, I'm really struggling. I'm not sleeping. I'm not thinking as clearly as I'd like to. And to Erik and your points, this was all performance issues that I was worried about. And he's like, hey, I think I've got something for you. And so he called up Erik at the previous company. We morphed names a little bit. And he said, hey, I've got this guy. Here's kind of what's going on with him. Is he a good candidate for you guys? And so, my boss at SOCOM, fully supportive of people getting better while they're on staff tours. And so they sent me out to California. And, after 2 weeks of treatment, I had my first full night of sleep in a decade. It was unbelievable. And what that did for me across performance measures was incredible. Memory came back, focus. I was able to go from 15 minutes reading a book to 4 hours. Wow. That sleep changed me from low 200s testosterone to almost 1,000. Everything from that restorative sleep, everything got better for me. And, it changed my life dramatically. And so the other part about, that I think you got a sense of with Erik is when he walked through our treatment process is that there's no judgment. You don't have to tell your whole story to a psychologist and kind of relive all those things, which for some of us can be really hard. You don't have to take pills, which and for me, I tried everything before I went to this treatment. I was on SSRIs, I was on beta blockers, I had Botox in my forehead, and if you saw me, it wasn't to look good. It was to help with migraine headaches. It was, I had done chiropractic, everything that every person who struggles with this kind of stuff goes through. And none of it worked. And so when it was non-judgmental, it's like, hey, yeah, your brain's out of whack a little bit. We're going to help nudge it back into place. And chances are you're going to feel really good when that happens. That was really refreshing. There wasn't like, you're broken. No. It's just my brain wasn't as resilient as some other people's taking blasts. And, it was an experience that provided tremendous hope and hope that you don't have to spend the rest of your life feeling like that. And because a lot of us, you get to that point where you're just like, well, I guess I'm just going to be kind of broken for the rest of my life. And I'm going to, at the time I was 35, and I'm like, man, I've got another, 45, 50 years left. This is going to be rough. And the light that I felt going through this process was incredible. So as I went through my command tour, US SOCOM was doing a trial, and to look at this treatment they're doing in San Diego. And so and obviously I'm not a doctor, so I don't give medical advice, but the doctor at our command was able to send people to the trial. And even if they were in the placebo group, they eventually got treatment right afterwards. And so the impacts that I saw on the dozens and dozens and dozens of SEALs that went through this, and we had wives walking through the door crying because they said that we gave them their husband back. I mean, that alone is worth, the heartache that Eric talked about, working at a startup and struggling through this and working through the FDA and, trading one military bureaucracy for a new medical bureaucracy. It's all worth it when you see people's careers, people basically go from not even really wanting to compete anymore within the military process. And it's an up or out, kind of organization, to being 100% back in. Like, they're back in the game. They want to play. They know they have something to offer. Seeing those stark shifts with dozens and dozens and dozens of guys, I mean, it can't help but touch you. Like, I mean, that gets you in a place where this is the new mission. We must spread this technology because it's going to change so many lives.
So what is the plan? I'm kind of jumping ahead here a bit, but just that's something that really interests me. Is what is the kind of the plan? Because it does sound such a great way of treating people. What is the plan to get it out there and make it widely available? Not just in the States, but also like internationally as well. Because this isn't something that just will benefit veterans, is it? This could be survivors of rape or any kind of child abuse, and there's so many people could benefit from. So how do you guys plan on like rolling it out and scaling this?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I'm really glad you brought up that this isn't just for veterans. This is for Olympians who change careers just like military do, and they need to find purpose, and they're struggling through that process. This is for victims of sexual assault. This is for anybody with neurological changes that aren't beneficial. And so that's my job. That's why I was brought into the company, is to commercialize this incredible technology that Erik and many others have built and developed over the past 10 years through studies and trials and all these things. And so our business model right now is we have this technology and this process, and any doctor, any clinic across the country and internationally works with us, and we provide them the technology, and they're able to treat their own patients underneath the doctor care, because we as a technology company don't treat the patients. We provide the technology to a doctor, and then they treat patients. And so right now we've got locations across the U.S., a few international in Australia, for example, and it's really neat because we're in a high growth environment right now, and frankly, with COVID, we're finding that almost all of our clinics are completely full, both for performance and for treatment purposes. And so I see that being a great growth potential just to reach more people, but that's kind of the plan, and that's what we're moving forward with right now.
And this is Eric. The other thing to mention is in terms of the ability to scale. Right now, the requirement from FDA, every protocol that we do is done manually by hand. It's assisted by computational analytics. What we're trying to get FDA approved is an automated protocol generator that can do hundreds of thousands of these per second. And so we've worked with a development team to automate a lot of this and the way that we look at those brain images. And I've been blown away by the accuracy. I think we've come to a point where machine learning has just as good, perhaps better pattern recognition than human eyes. And so that's a very exciting kind of evolution of the technology. And so we have to get the confirmatory data from this trial. I think we're about 1.5 to 2 years away from that. But in the meantime, we didn't feel morally that we could just sit here and wait. And so we continue to grow the team that's doing this manually and by hand. And so we have capacity, and we're looking at different sort of strategic partners to work with.
So, Erik, is this something then that somebody would get on a regular basis, like this kind of treatment on a regular basis, or is it like a one-off, or do you come back from it like a tune-up that you get every now and again? How would it work in terms of like the frequency that people come in for?
That's a great question. The answer is, unfortunately, I think it depends. And so people who come in with a discrete injury, let's just say a concussion, you treat them for 4 to 6 weeks, they start to feel better. We found the durability of the treatment to be fairly good. And we have people who are 4 or 5 years out who are doing great, as long as they are endorsing good sort of environmental behaviors where they're sleeping the right time, doing good nutrition, exercising right, and they're not kind of going out all night benders and snorting grams of cocaine and that kind of thing. People can do quite well for a long period of time. There's a subset from our initial pilot data. Roughly 5 to 8% of people will come back within a year for a tune-up, and you might give them a week or two of treatment, and their frequency modulation shifts back very quickly. And so we found that there's a subset that can do better with an interval treatment. The one area that I think we're entering into exploration, and it's funny thinking back, in that pilot study that we did, there were 2 UDT SEALs who were very in tune with their marksmanship scores and said, gosh, I'm shooting better. And they know from that metric when it's time to come in.
Wow.
And so, yeah, there are people from a performance perspective who just want a competitive edge. And so, for example, we have some executives of software companies and other industries who, when they feel themselves sliding, or if they had to travel 18 time zones for a meeting and have come back and are really jet lagging bad or aren't thinking as clearly as they want to, they can come in and get a week or 2 of treatment, and they feel themselves improve in that way. So it kind of depends on the condition and severity of the injury. We have a veteran who had a through and through gunshot wound to the brain, and he's like family to us. And so we treat him essentially indefinitely. Whenever he wants to come in, we'll just treat him. So to your point, it depends on the situation. But for many cases, just one session, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, will give people very long-lasting benefit.
Oh, and how long would an average session be? It's
30 minutes. It's about 5 to 6 seconds of stimulation, 54 seconds of rest. And then we do that 30 cycles, so about a 30-minute treatment. For some cases, if they've got multiple injuries, multiple areas of injury, we can treat at 2 locations. That's a 45-minute session. But this is sort of the personalization of the protocol, depends on the individual.
And can somebody go back to work then after that? If someone came in the morning, they come in first thing in the morning, got 30 minutes treatment. Can they carry on with their day as normal after that, or what are the kind of side effects that come along with this treatment?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump on that one. So first answer is absolutely. This is a very quick, painless. Frankly, I always enjoyed my 30 minutes in the chair because you're talking to somebody, kind of catching up, and the neurotechnicians become your friends. And so you don't only just get up and go to work, you're going to have your best work day. At least in my experience, I was completely coming together in a cohesive way and was much more productive at work. And, those were my best days. And so, so I would say it's not only can you return to work, you return to work better.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, how about side effects in terms of, is there any? Have you come across any downsides when you've been doing these trials, or when you've had patients going through it?
Yeah. So, and this is always something that's really important to talk about is the risks and adverse events associated with the treatment. And the most common one is a headache. Usually transient. It's usually going to be an hour or 2 of headache that you can alleviate with over-the-counter strength Tylenol or ibuprofen. But that is one of the more common experiences. It can be anywhere from 5 to 10% of people who go through will experience a headache. There can be a feeling of euphoria where people feel a bit overstimulated for a period of time. Not always a bad thing.
I was going to say, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah. There's a phenomenon we've been learning about that has colloquially been called the dip, where after a week, some people may feel themselves kind of emotionally hit a nadir and not feel as good as they want to. And then they sort of bump back up. But we started trying to coach our patients that this isn't an unusual phenomenon to experience and just to stick with it. The most significant risk that we talk about is a risk of seizure. And I'm knocking on wood when I say this. We've not had a de novo seizure at our facility, but it is a hypothetical risk with the stimulation device. We're subthreshold technology, meaning we lower the intensity of the treatment because our philosophy is that the precision matters more than the amount of power that you're delivering. But the device runs a risk of between 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 100,000 risk of evoking a seizure. And that to me sounded very scary initially. But what I've learned, the Nintendo Game Boys that our kids and grandchildren play with, those brochures list a risk of seizure of 1 in 4,000 from the flickering of the screen. And so just to put a frame and a benchmark around it, it is very safe, but it is something that we need to talk to. If somebody has a history of epilepsy or seizure disorder, that is a relative contraindication to treatment, and we typically would not recommend treatment for those individuals. It's also limiting in the sense if there is intracranial metal, for example, a piece of shrapnel, or if somebody's had an aneurysm and has a surgical clip or a staple, we wouldn't be able to treat those individuals as well.
And what kind of so does TBI, is that something that causes epilepsy and seizures? So is there is that a fairly common thing with TBI? So is there a significant portion of people who benefits from this treatment who won't be able to get it because of those we'll just call it contraindicated the potential side effects? Yeah,
so it's there's two types of contraindications. There's a relative contraindication and there's an absolute contraindication. And so as an example, if you have a large piece of metal inside your head, that would be an absolute contraindication. We wouldn't be able to treat. So the seizure is a relative contraindication. And if it was a one-time episode, let's say 5 years ago, and you didn't have a repeat episode, it was just associated with a mechanism of injury, it's a physician's judgment call. But most, I think, would be willing to treat that individual. If they've had chronic episodes of seizure, let's just say daily seizures ever since the injury, that would be one where we probably want to exercise more caution. We do have safety protocols, and so there'd be a conversation between the patient and the doctor, and then probably our team over here at Wave, where patient safety is always the priority. But those cases are not an absolute no. It's just something where we have to have a clinical conversation.
And how's the Veterans Administration taking all this? Are they on board?
And I give them a lot of credit. It's a huge bureaucracy, and we've done our best to navigate it. And so there was a bill that made its way passed unanimously through Congress and Senate, HR 1162, affectionately called No Hero Left Untreated. And we were on the verge of starting this pilot with the VA, but COVID-19 kind of got in the way. And so we're starting to reinvigorate those conversations. But I think that they're very interested. We're doing another clinical trial for, we've innovated a home device, and we're not ready to commercialize or market that yet. We're hoping within the next year we'll be there, but that is called synchronized transcranial magnetic stimulation. And they conducted a trial. It's a take-home unit on PTSD with very favorable results. I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised, almost blown away by how much better it did than placebo, which was wonderful. And so based on that, they're doing another trial looking at how this might help with substance use disorder. And so the researcher there, Noah Phillip, is one of the thought leaders in the neuromodulation space. And so the VA has been a very good and active partner with us. And we're working probably more on the research side than on the commercial side, but we're hoping to provide this to as many people as possible as soon as possible.
Okay, so let's say in the interim, because I'm sure like a lot of people listening, for one reason or another, will find this kind of treatment very interesting. But in the meantime, how can somebody get into this pattern of and get all the benefits from a good night's sleep without this right now? Can you give people some kind of pointers on how they can get towards this kind of thing on their own for now without any kind of assistance?
Absolutely. And Ned can share some of his real-time feedback on this. But one of the things that we really emphasize at our clinics is the importance of honoring your circadian rhythm and your biology. And the best way to do that is to get natural sunlight in the morning.
Most people are in the UK. I don't know. It doesn't have to be sunlight, but at least just being outside.
It is pissing down today. You guys in what? You're in Southern California.
Yeah.
So if you could bottle some up, then that would be great. But no, so you just mean to get because by sunlight you mean just light in general, right? As long as it's not pitch black outside.
You can just be outside on an overcast day. But there is a spectrum of natural sunlight that is blue light, which is 450 to 500 nanometer light. And when that touches your retina, it sets off a number of different biological responses where roughly 14 hours later, you'll have a spike in melatonin that will allow you to get very deep restorative sleep.
Right.
And so whether it's having, a bowl of cereal outside, going for a walk in the park, or, just sitting on your porch, getting that natural unfiltered light will be helpful. And the converse of that is true as well. In the evening time, your TV, your phone, your tablet, those emit a certain amount of blue light and can be stimulating. And so we have to avoid that in the waning hours of night between, I would say, probably after 6 or 7 o'clock, which I know is very hard. But we should try to minimize our screen time late at night to allow ourselves to get into a good deep sleep. The other type of sleep hygiene habits that are important, if I would say the number one beyond getting blue light would be trying to go to sleep at the same time every night, ideally between 9 and 10:30, and then waking up at the same time. Sleeping in cold environments can be helpful. Obviously not so cold that it's uncomfortable, but cold temperatures tend to allow you to get into deeper stages of sleep. Not having too much rich food, not having kind of a late dinner will allow you to sleep better. And, I would say at a high level, those are some of the real high points we emphasize. Trying to avoid stimulants like nicotine or caffeine after lunchtime would be another good one.
So what about the eating before bed then? Like how many hours before bed would you say not to eat then, just as a rule of thumb?
I would say at least 2 hours before you sleep. And it's funny, I've started tracking my sleep a bit more closely. There's 2 devices that we like. One's called the Whoop and one called the Aura Ring. And I've realized through just kind of trial and error that I need to eat definitely before 7, but I started to try eating at 6. And I find if I stop snacking after 7, I get much better sleep. But that may just be me. My wife can snack later and she sleeps like a log. So everyone's a little bit different. But for myself, I definitely try to have my last meal before 7.
And just one on the getting the light in the morning. Does it make a difference? Like, is there a difference in if you get light through glass, or like, so say through a window or through a car window, rather than being directly in the sunlight?
Yeah, and so blue light is filtered out through any kind of treated glass. And so I was thinking, even for myself, I go from my bedroom into my garage, and I get into a car, and I'm immediately behind glass. And I walked about 15 feet into my office. And so I was getting no blue light. And it's no wonder, my sleep suffered, and I was getting horrible sleep. And so just on the advice of the team here, even before I joined the company, I started getting blue light in the morning. And I did find that my sleep self-corrected. And so this is sort of, it doesn't cost any money. It's just sort of, there's 5,000 years of evolution that's built into every one of us. And we just, in a way, we're sort of honoring our legacy and our biology, and we need to get, the blue light in the morning. we're the beneficiaries of artificial light, meaning we can stay productive through the evening, but that can sort of sabotage our sleep. And there is a brilliant scientist named Matthew Walker. He published a book called Why We Sleep. But one of the quotes that really stuck with me is that we're the only species in nature that will voluntarily deprive itself of sleep for really no good benefit and really to great detriment. And so if there was one message the audience took from today, I would say really do everything you can to protect your sleep, and it'll pay huge dividends down the road.
Are you guys both active as well, like on the fitness side of things? Do you find that helps you sleep?
I think, Ned is way fitter than me. Like, you can't see me right now, but he's got muscles coming out of his eyeballs, whereas I'm a bit more sedentary. But I do try to stay fit, but that's definitely something I would recommend. There's this new field in medicine called functional medicine, and there's really 4 pillars. One is activity, exercise. The second is nutrition, putting good fuel into your body. The third is recovery, getting good sleep. And the fourth, that's probably understated but important, is connectedness, just making sure that you're maintaining healthy relationships, avoiding sort of those toxic relationships that can develop in our lives. But definitely activity is something we emphasize.
So I'm going to put my little tinfoil hat on for a minute, because I know my listeners will be mad at me if I don't put it on at least once in an episode. Have you guys had any pushback due to the fact that you're coming up with this? You're in an industry where there's a lot of money in pharmaceuticals, and you guys are creating and expanding this technology. This is obviously works, is non-invasive, and comes along, doesn't have like a lot of the bad side effects that might come from the pharmaceutical industry. Has there been any? Have you come across any issues like that where people may be pushing back at this because it's obviously if you can solve a problem, quite often that means that some people go without a lot of money.
Yeah. So this is Ned. I want that problem. But where we do come across it is actually a different place. And that is, as we look at different medical groups, where our treatment isn't cheap. It's like Erik said, it's expensive machinery. It's a lot of algorithms and research and development behind it. And when a hospital or a group can say, well, I can treat this person with a 10-cent pill, and they're looking quarterly earnings, or they're looking at monthly earnings, and a handful of pills is going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than what we're doing. Unfortunately, some people, not of course not everybody, but there's a lot of side effects that come with that. The flat affect of people not feeling like themselves when they're on some of these SSRIs or beta blockers or different medications that are out there, and we don't downplay those at all, because they help so many people in such a great way. We just want to make sure that we're an option as well. So for those people that don't benefit from that, or they have an option, they have something else. And so we don't want to compete with pharmaceutical. We just want to be another option.
Okay, awesome. Erik, I have a question that's a bit off the kind of the beaten track of this conversation, but something I found really interesting is you wanted to, originally you were going to go into the seminary, right? And that was one of your, and I'd love to know like how how religion kind of informs your work, or if it, well, maybe it doesn't at all, and how you're on the kind of cutting edge of this science. I'd just be really interested to know how the two kind of go together or don't go together.
You've done your research. Yeah. So when I went to college, I did contemplate joining the seminary, and decided that wasn't the path for me. But I do maintain, my faith, and I do think to some degree they walk hand in hand. And in science, that kind of spirituality doesn't come into play. It's a very just kind of, what does the data show us? And it's just, kind of an empirical analysis. But with this kind of treatment, there is this human element to it, that all of us went into medicine for a reason. And usually it's about saving lives and stamping out disease and doing what we can to help humanity. And in current traditional medicine, a lot of that is done incrementally, where if somebody's cholesterol level drops 20 points, we're very excited. Or if their blood pressure changes, you feel pretty good about it. And But to see people changed in such a profound way with the work we're doing here, it really tapped into something that I think I had lost. Just become very jaded and cynical in medicine. And this reminded me of all the noble reasons why we go into this field and this profession. And it's not a panacea. We don't shoot rainbows and, it's not like glitter and unicorns or anything like that. But I think that this is a very powerful instrument that can help people on their healing journey in whatever way it takes shape. And so if you're asking, is it mutually exclusive? Can faith be incorporated into medicine? I do think that they can be intertwined in how you practice. I would never impose sort of those beliefs on my patients. We live in a very diverse world. Some of my closest friends are Hindi or Buddhist or atheist, and but we're all very respectful of each other, and there's nothing but, I think, positive feelings there. But there is an element of that, I think, in this treatment, in that it is fairly disruptive, and we're talking about changing behavioral health and mental health, not looking at labels such as depression or anxiety or dysthymia or bipolar disorder, but rather just looking at how the brain is functioning and identifying areas that they could be tuned up and optimized, and saying, we can help with that.
Yeah, dude, I couldn't agree more. Ned, I'd love to know as well, just from your point of view as someone who's commanded troops. We have young leaders listening. We have future leaders listening. While we have you here, I'd love to know, if you could just give us a few of the kind of like the most important lessons that you learned leading men, and just pass those on to our listeners.
Yeah, I'll share a couple, and one of them is a very human kind of leadership lesson that I learned. And it's something that I made sure to pass on to my young junior officers at the SEAL team. And that is that, we all want to go forward. I don't know how long deployments are in the unit you were a part of, but mine were traditionally 4 to 6 months. And there is a deep need for all of us, because we're leaving our families. We've trained up for this. We want to go forward and make a tremendous impact on the battlefield. And we need to have that, but sometimes it can get a little bit much, where we start to almost get into the mindset that we're going to win the war while we're on our 6-month deployment. And some of us that have been around for a bit, we look back and man, that was crazy. We're 18 years into this now. So I bring that up because that it's keeping that in perspective is so important, because at the end of the day, you're going to come back from combat. You're going to come home and you're going to see your family again. And outside of that 6 months, for the next 50 years, you're going to be looking yourself in the mirror. And the moral and ethical decisions that you make on the battlefield, they will either buttress you and support you in your ethical and values, your ethical life moving forward, or they will be a hindrance. And so, it's kind of this idea of never forget that you need to live with yourself forever, and make the right decisions on the battlefield based on that thought process. That's number one. And that's really coming from, I'm fortunate to have some close friends who didn't make the right decisions on deployment from that perspective. And I'm always very careful not to judge people's combat performance, because having done it enough, I know the feelings and the emotion, and no one can ever understand what you're going through on the battlefield and the decisions you're making based on the information you have. It's incredibly difficult. But I have seen some people that can't live with their decisions very well. And I've had people call me up saying, hey, I heard you went through this brain treatment stuff. I need help. I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, I can't live with this anymore. I'm going to commit suicide. And that's heartbreaking to me, because these are people that are incredible individuals, and they put themselves in position, or they were put in a position where they're having trouble living with what they did. And that breaks my heart. it's a really tough one because they went forward to serve their country and to serve the men and women that they're deployed with, and to come home with that baggage is something I think as leaders we want to help people avoid.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's heavy, but like it's dead, but it's dead on the it's dead on the nail. Erik, I'm sure obviously people listening to today's episode might want to learn more, and we'll finish up in a minute with you. Like let us know where we can find out more about Wave Neuroscience. But something I'd love to do, something we're going to start asking on the podcast on a regular basis, and you two guys will be the first. So you're the our guinea pigs here. I hate to put you on the spot, but if you could recommend 2 books that have been either like important to you in your life, or 2 books that you recommend that anybody should read. Could you give us 2 of those? They could be about anything. It doesn't necessarily need to be about neuroscience. I don't know how much our listeners read about that, but just 2 books that are meaningful to you or could be helpful to people.
That's a great question. And do you have 2 that are on the tip of your tongue, or?
I do. Okay. The first is Steven Pressfield's Turning Pro.
Oh yeah, awesome.
I absolutely love the book. I mean, I've read everything he's done, but I feel like that is one of the books that kind of pulls all of his thoughts, all of his fiction and nonfiction together. And it was not only something that I felt really passionate about, of this idea of, are you an amateur or are you a professional? And here's what defines each of those things and the mindset behind it. So that book is something I've shared with, a huge impact on myself, and I've shared it with a lot of people. And hopefully I portrayed how important it was to me. And the second is probably Robert Greene's book on human nature. And it's his most recent book. And the reason that was important for me is we deal with so many people across our careers and across our lives. And, I found that sometimes I look at somebody and I just wonder, where the hell are they coming from? I just didn't understand why they were doing the things they were doing. And it was causing frustration. And by going through his book, and it's a big book, but it really starts to kind of type all of us. And it's easy. And he's very good in this book about saying, hey, just because you're reading this doesn't mean you're sitting outside of this paradigm. You're this type too. So don't think you're better than anybody. And so that book really, really helped me understand people, empathize and sympathize with them, and connect better, because at the end of the day, all of us want to do something great in this world. All of us want to have a positive impact. And it's just sometimes people portray it, in my eyes, strangely. And to understand that was really, really helpful.
We actually had Steven Pressfield on as a guest a few episodes ago. So I'm going to add my voice to that and just say that again. I think the Turning Pro is brilliant for anyone, be whether or not you want to be the best operator out there, or the best artist, or the best, just the best athlete, the best of anything. I think that's a great book. I haven't read that Robert Greene one, so this is going to be going on a list. I'm going to be sending this list out to people from now on. So thank you for that, Erik. Have you come up with yours?
Yeah, so the first one I mentioned already, it's Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and it's kind of
awesome.
I would say the manifesto on why sleep is important, and he delves into so much of the science. And for me, it was kind of nirvana to get validation on in so many parameters. But I think he talks about a lot of the downside, of course, of being underslept, where there's cardiovascular, poor health outcomes, cerebrovascular, increased proneness to injury. But there was some upside to this that I really had no idea about. And, they've tracked, for example, getting good quality sleep in NBA players resulted in higher points per minute, lower risk of injury, more assists, and just across the board, there were these performance changes. And if there were one human performance elixir that you could give people that is free and easily accessible to all, it would be improving your quality of sleep. And so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if there was one book, I'd highly recommend that. And then the second one, and it may just be kind of this point in my life, but there's a writer, Atul Gawande, who, he's a Harvard graduate, but he writes about sort of careers in medicine and many of the moral dilemmas we come across. And there's a book called Being Mortal. I think any of his books are great. The Checklist Manifesto is another great one.
Oh, yeah.
But, being more, so my dad passed away about a month and a half ago, and you end up with these end of life questions about, are we prolonging life or extending suffering? All these kind of questions that I think on a day-to-day basis, we don't want to think about, and that are kind of horrible and morbid. But I think we all come across it, whether, everyone has to lose a parent at some point, and God willing, it'll never be one of our children, but among our friends, just kind of dealing with that and going through kind of this very human exercise. I thought it was one of the best explorations of a very difficult topic that I'd read. So that would be my second book.
Those are all great recommendations. And I think that, it's like you said, nobody's going through, we're all going to go through that point at some point in our life. Better to get ahead of the problem now and have some understanding of it before it happens, because, and this is the same with everything. And like you said, better to be tuning ourselves up than trying to put ourselves back together when we're totally broken. And I think that goes for education as well. There's been so much that we've covered today. I know we've only just scratched the surface of the amount of work that you've been doing, which is I want to say as well, just for, from a layman's point of view, just absolutely phenomenal to hear about. And I appreciate the work that you guys are doing and the Wave are doing. And I know that so many people are benefiting from it. So thank you for that. But where can people learn more about this if they want to? Where can people kind of follow along with the work that you guys are doing?
So there's two websites that I'd recommend. One, of course, is waveneuro.com. That's our technology entity. And there's something called the Corporate Practice of Medicine. It's a regulatory requirement that the physicians who are practicing medicine are not encumbered by profit. They're always going to do what's right for the patient. And so we have to separate the technology from our clinical group. And so the clinical group is called braintreatmentcenter.com. And they can read a bit more about the technology there and the different centers that we have. Okay,
I want to come to you both for final words. So we'll come to you, Ned, first. Any final words for the guests before we leave today?
I really appreciate you having us on. And it's not a panacea, but I just want to let everybody know that who is out there struggling with some of these things, that there is hope.
Oh, thank you so much. And Erik?
I would say similarly, just a message of hope. And sometimes it feels like technology is evolving at such a rapid pace, and how much of that becomes meaningful in our day-to-day lives. And just because we're sitting where we are, there's so much promising technology and data that's out there that if someone is struggling or looking for, is there anything to be hopeful about? I do feel like just on the horizon, there's quite a bit of disruptive and breakthrough innovation that's coming. So really just a message of hope.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. And thank you for both being absolute pros at this as well. I mean, we've never done a 3-person podcast from the other side of the world before. So you guys are professional at the audio side of things as well. So just thank you so much, guys. Cheers. And I hope I can get you both a beer next time I'm in Southern California.
Absolutely. We're buying.
Thank you so much, Ned and Erik, for coming on today's podcast. I learned a lot there, not going to lie. Head's still hurting from a little bit. I'm just glad that we have people like them out there developing this kind of technology, which will benefit so many people. I'm really appreciative of the work that they're doing and for them giving up the time to come up on the show today, guys. I'm sure you are too. With that being said, please go and follow our guests. Please spread the word to anybody you think can benefit from hearing it. Also, I want to say thank you to Combat Comb Over for sponsoring today's podcast. Again, guys, please go and follow them. Support these people as they support us. And the Royal British Legion podcast doesn't happen without them. Check them out at Royal British Legion on social media and at rbl.org.uk. They do all kinds of things, guys, for veterans and their families. As I say every episode, there's no podcast without them. That's the bottom line, guys. I'm not exaggerating there. They make this possible. I think one of the most important things they do as well is that they keep the memory of generations that have gone before us alive. That is so important, especially in this day and age where unfortunately a lot of our bravest are passing on to the next life. A lot of our bravest are passing on, and you know, we need to keep their memory alive, and the Royal British Legion are instrumental in doing that. So please follow them. Please share their posts. If they're making a post about a battle in Burma or Normandy or a 75th anniversary, please share those posts, guys. Please get them out there into the world, because you might know. You might know about what happened at D-Day. You might know about what happened in Burma, but most people don't, and they should do, because we owe these people a debt of gratitude. So let's get the message out there by sharing the Royal British Legion's social media posts, because they are all very, very valuable. So please do that, guys. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review. Please tell a friend, or please make a post. And if you really fucking enjoyed today's podcast, then how about doing all three? Doing your old muckagers a favour. While we're on the subject of me, which is, let's be honest, my favourite subject to talk about, I have a new book out. It's called Lost in the Fire. If you want to support the podcast, a good way of doing that is supporting me. Because if I'm homeless, then there won't be no more podcasts. Lost in the Fire, it's a thriller. It's set in Vegas. If you like drugs, chicks, and people getting murdered, then you will enjoy the book. If you want a signed copy, just hit me up on social media. Otherwise, you can find it on Amazon. Geraint Jones, Lost in the Fire. I think we've all been lost in the fire at some point, haven't we? At some point in our lives. Guys, right. Next Monday. Holy shit. When I tell you that this guest stacked bodies, I mean it literally. We've already recorded the episode, and he's been telling me all kinds of stories. He's a really funny bloke. And some of those stories involve literally piling the enemy dead to make fighting positions. Safe to say, I came away from that episode feeling like I've never done a fucking thing in my life. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because he's a great bloke, and I really enjoyed it. His name is John Stryker Meyer. Absolutely legend of a bloke. You might have heard him on Jocko Podcast. He's been on there 4 times. This is going to be the first of his episodes on Veteran State of Mind. It won't be his last. He's a Vietnam veteran. It's an incredible episode. I know you guys enjoyed the Dale Dye episode very much, which is, I've got to be honest, one of my favourite ones that we've done. And it's just a real privilege to have these guys on. So looking forward to giving you that one on Monday. I'll catch you next time. Love you. Bye.
Yeah. Listen. Shout out Teaser. You told me not to worry, and you wouldn't break my heart. You told me you were sorry, yeah, my whole world fell apart. You said it's not my fault, and yeah, I've never done you wrong. I'm grinding to a halt, now I can see you're moving on. I promised I'd get better, and I told you things would change. You keep me to the gutter, yeah, I'll never be the same. I've gotta let you go, now live your life and spread your wings. And yeah, you put on quite a show, and pulled the puppet strings. And are you sure that you don't want me? Remember all the pain, or maybe you should thank me. It's your loss and my gain. I'm leaving now forever, I won't hang my head in shame. But yeah, you've taken me for granted, and you should feel ashamed. You sold a dream to all of us, a dream that we'd all die for, a reason for us all to live and something we could fight for. I might just help a man up to his feet or hold a newborn, but no matter what I do, my hands remembering my rifle, yeah.
Life's hard, I know that, still wouldn't change shit. I wouldn't go back, yeah, I wouldn't go back. Feelings I hold back, memories fade, yeah, they go fast, yeah, they go fast. Good times to come and go, survive the highs and lows, just take it step by step, I guess, yeah, I suppose. Good times to come and go, survive the highs and lows, just take it step by step, I guess, yeah, I suppose.